I've always been a bit of a history buff. I love reading about history. And one book that came out several years ago had a huge impact on me. It's called The Passage Through the Sea by David McCullough. And it's all about the building of the Panama Canal. It doesn't sound like it would be an interesting read, but it really was fascinating. Now, I've never been able to visit the canal zone. I've not been able to see that amazing engineering marvel. But I've seen pictures, I've seen videos. And maybe you've seen the same things. And the first thing that strikes your eye is, man, there's not a lot of wiggle room. That is a tight squeeze for their boats. Why didn't they make it bigger? Why such a tight squeeze? Why such a narrow passageway? Well, after reading the book, I understand why it is built the way it is. The big question is, why is the canal so small, but how did they build that thing to begin with? It's amazing that such a thing was constructed. The Americans were not the first to try it. The French tried decades before and failed dismally because it was nearly an impossible task. The canal unites the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, two different sea levels, already a hard thing to try to balance out. But the terrain is miserable, mountainous, jungle. All these things had to be conquered. Nature had to be brought to heel to have this thing. But not just that. Disease, malaria, malnutrition, all these things had to also be addressed before we could have this thing called the Panama Canal. And then just the human condition, greed, stupidity, a lack of courage, all these things had to be confronted. But nevertheless, it's there, the Panama Canal. The path between the seas, uniting two enormous bodies of water, but at a great cost and at a huge price. And sometimes that's what it takes to unite two different worlds, two different realities. When we think about what it takes to unite earth and heaven, then any human achievement pales in comparison. Because that's ultimately what salvation is about, isn't it? Overcoming the distance between our world and God's world. Heaven and earth. Uniting the Atlantic and Pacific, nothing in comparison. Because just think about all the things that had to be overcome for that union, for that passage to occur. Human sin, the attacks of Satan, the long history of resistance, the darkness of the human heart. All these things had to be confronted. All these things belong to the mission of Christ. One purpose and one purpose only, to unite us to the world of God, to create a pathway by which we could reach him and he can reach us. And it came also at an enormous cost, at an enormous price. We can look at these passages and be complaining, why is the way so narrow? We should be grateful there is a path at all. We should give thanks and praise that we're not closed off, that we're not trapped within this terrestrial sphere, but that heaven is a real possibility for us. So a feeling of gratitude must be in our hearts. The second reading from Hebrews is very, very clear. You have to be made to fit this pathway. You have to conform yourself to it. This is the whole discipline of the church. Lots of things have to be shed. Lots of things have to be sacrificed because the passage is narrow and it will not hold all of our baggage or carry all our weight. Indeed, it is a very narrow passage. It's only as wide as the outstretched arm of the crucified God. Jesus doesn't simply point to the passage. He doesn't simply tell us about it. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And as he tells us in John's gospel, he is the gate through which everyone has to pass. It's such an important thing to keep in mind because it raises how important it is for us to be here. It is the real presence of Christ, the real presence of the crucified. It is the real presence of those outstretched arms, which is our only path. It is our only hope. He is the way by which the abyss of the waters of this world can be escaped from, and that we can now enter into the waters of the heavenly Jerusalem.